Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, the 16th of April, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio, and we will be joined by Vanessa, Beeley and Sandi Adams on live link. Now, we're just going to say that a lot to cover on today's news. For the presenters, the theme which is recurrent for us is that whilst we see more and more terrible events in the world, whether it's in Ukraine or in the Middle East, what we think we are watching is the dismantling of society and infrastructure in UK. But we've got quite a busy news today. We'll be talking about the Cambridge Peace Conference on the Ukraine Russia proxy war. We're going to be having a look at the clampdown on free speech in Glastonbury. We'll be looking at diplomacy in Antalya. And we're also going to be looking at the rise of Freeports, and also a very interesting section about how Israel is now going to look after our mental health. Let's get started with the peace conference. Of course, this is not the sort of thing that you're going to see on the BBC, but UK Column team were delighted to be invited not only to help arrange this conference, but also to speak. And absolutely beautiful environment in Jesus College, Cambridge. But as you can see there, amongst the tranquility of that setting, of course, the subject was the brutal, absolutely brutal war, the proxy war, which the West is still determined to keep running in Ukraine. Now, I want to say that basically we had a number of speakers, some of them ex-military, some of them diplomats, some of them professionals who've lived in Ukraine. Major General Beeley here, retired. He's on the right of the screen, making a case that this war really should never have happened, and it's not a good thing for America. We also had the retired Indian Major General Bakshi. UK Column has interviewed General Bakshi, extremely interesting man, giving his perspective on how this war got started and why it needs to be stopped as soon as possible. But we also had some really serious concerns, and the lady in front of behind the lectern, Dr. Deepti Bisht, who did a tremendous amount of work to get this conference together, was warning about the really serious side of the Ukrainian conflict, because both the United States and the Russians have had concerns about dirty nuclear weapons. And of course, this is something which the longer the conflict goes on, the greater the risk. Let's just hear a little bit about what she was saying at the conference. We should have a little video clip here, I think. Okay, unfortunately, we haven't got that clip to show you, but essentially the point is that the possibility of a dirty bomb, a nuclear weapon in Ukraine, has been something that has arisen and has been of concern to both the Americans and the Russians as a result of statements made by the Ukrainians themselves. Again, this is a subject which the BBC simply doesn't want to cover. But other subjects that were brought to the surface in this very interesting conference were the concerns about the US biolabs in Ukraine. And if we just have a look at this one slide that was part of a really excellent talk about this problem, it says that on March the 10th, 2022, senior defence officials spoke about the Department of Defence's cooperative biological threat reduction program activities in Ukraine. And it says that the DoD has been working with the Ukrainian government since 2005 to secure 5 biological research laboratories in Kiev. And we've invested nearly $200 million in Ukraine since 2005, supporting 46 Ukrainian labs. So this was regarded as a huge problem. Now, I want to say that the conference itself was balanced, because while we had people who were concerned about what was happening, if you like, from the Russian side, we also had people speaking, such as Ms. Lopez, former US diplomat, talking about what the US policy is for Eastern Europe. And her talk was extremely interesting. It gives you some idea of the mindset in deep state America and the fear, really, of the Russians. Let's also just have a look at a little clip by George Galloway, who had a very interesting opening statement for the audience.
Well, thank you very much, not just for the invitation and for the introduction, but for the video that you just showed, and especially what you said immediately afterwards, that it was made 2 years ago. It spoke clearly as if it were made today. The fact that it was made 2 years ago shows both the prescience and the courage of the participants. Because 2 years ago, never mind 2 years ago, 6 months ago, these would have been described as Putin talking points. We would have been accused of being literal agents of the Russian state. For voicing that narrative, we would have been shadow banned, outright banned. If we'd booked this room, it would have been cancelled. If we'd held this conference, there would have been a protest outside. We would have been blackguarded by what still calls itself the mainstream media. Everything that was said there turned out to be true, and moreover is now the prevailing orthodoxy.
So George Galloway's key point was that just a few years ago, if you dared to speak out on the subject of Ukraine, the BBC and other Western media were simply going to label you as a Putin's puppet. But of course, all the warnings that people have been making over the way the conflict would go, it has gone, and we've seen the resulting slaughter on the battlefield. So just a small section there of a really excellent talk by George Galloway. But the other person who had a really interesting commentary was Andrew Bridgen. Let's have a little listen.
So what truth aren't we being told, or the public aren't being told? And I don't believe my colleagues are being told, my former colleagues in the House of Commons are being told. Well, for most of the public and for most MPs, the conflict in Ukraine started on the 24th of February 2022 when Russia invaded. That is their timeline. It is interesting that was about 6 hours after we'd just gone out of the last emergency, which was the COVID pandemic, which was officially ended at midnight on the 24th. And 6 hours later, we were into the next emergency, which was the Russian invasion of Ukraine. As various people have said, in 1991, at the end of the Cold War, in return for allowing Germany to re-amalgamate East and West Germany, we promised the then Russian leader that we would not move NATO and European Union an inch east of Germany. We broke that. We broke that agreement, the Minsk agreement. We broke that. We broke it repeatedly. We broke it with the Baltic states, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, Romania, and everything else.
So interesting commentary there from Andrew Bridge. And again, you will not hear this sort of commentary on the BBC or the mainstream media in the UK because free speech is suppressed. Now, I'd just like to bring this lady on screen, Lucy Morgan-Edwards. She has huge experience of working in Afghanistan, and she gave a really excellent talk pointing out effectively how the mainstream media had completely lied about the situation in Afghanistan. Let's just have a listen to a little clip of Lucy speaking.
So what truth aren't we being told, or the public aren't being told? And I don't believe my colleagues are being told, my former colleagues in the House of Commons are being told.
Of women. So of course the Afghan intervention was sold very, very heavily to the Western public as being about the protection of women and about the transition to democracy and so on. It was none of that. And I can tell you because I was there for,
So the point Lucy was making was that the mainstream media tried to say a lot of what was happening with Afghanistan was about the creation of democracy and help for women in society. But her experience on the ground was that was absolutely not what was happening. Now, I'll just emphasize a little bit more that a key part of the conference was to get people speaking about Ukraine instead of a one-sided delivery. And one of the points being made was that the Ukrainians had been taught to hate the Russians. This was part of a BBC interview where effectively one of Ukrainian policymaker was describing Russians living within the LPR and DPR, Donetsk People's Republic, Lugansk People's Republic, as scum. The BBC clearly helping to whip up the hatred here. And this is a key point, that the Ukrainians have been taught to hate the Russians. How's this taken place? Well, part of my own talk was to have a look at how propaganda has been working around this conflict. And so this was the key part of what I had to say. We've got a Western media bias, which is essentially that anything to do with the West is good, Ukraine is good, but anything to do with the Russians is bad. And I asked the audience if this was just propaganda or mind control, and I pointed out to them it was both. So at the end of the day, if you can change the mindset of the Ukrainians, they become lambs for the slaughter. And what I described in the talk was UK's stealth attack on Ukraine. And I used a lot of material that many of our viewers will have seen before. I'm pointing out that the BBC, of course, in BBC Monitoring works alongside UK intelligence services who are working alongside the American intelligence services, such as the NSA. And I've also pointed out how this stealth attack on Ukraine has worked. With UK's BBC Media Action helping drive change in Ukraine, money coming in for soft power change via the Department for International Development. We've got UK programme assistance regarding banking and conditional loans coming in. We've got the EU pumping in its propaganda and control. And of course, we've also got the weapons coming in. And what does that achieve? Well, ultimately, that achieves the proxy war. So the Ukrainians led to believe that freedom and democracy are in the West. We who live in the West know that's not true. And at the end of the day, it's those Ukrainians that are dying, being slaughtered on the battlefield for the West proxy war. I also reminded people that the BBC, even in pushing out its commentary on the war through maps, is using the Institute for the Study of War, itself linked into the American Enterprise Institute. And if we look at the family members associated with this, we come back to Victoria Newland, coming from a Ukrainian family, but of course she's been the ace war hawk from the time of the revolution, and BBC Media Action in on the ground amongst Ukrainian society. If we have a look at it from a different aspect, we can put Zelensky at the centre here. This is a Western propaganda game where the BBC controls what is known as Ukraine, quote, independent media. But we've also got the pressure of the likes of Victoria Nuland and Nina Jankovic, the former advisor to the Ukraine ministry, executive director from the Department of Homeland Security. So essentially, this is UK and US propaganda and mind control. And many in the audience at that event had no idea of the British political parties imposing applied psychology in order to change the mindset of the UK population. And this is something they've been boasting at for some time. So if we have a look at the minutes of the meetings during COVID, when applied psychology was being used to make people more frightened, to get them to adhere to lockdown, this was control of the British public by fear. But of course, what we seem to be looking at is control of the Ukrainian public by fear, and in particular, fear of the Russians themselves. And I think this is an ideal time to come across to you, Vanessa, because, of course, you've been watching psychology, we could call it diplomacy, work in the Middle Eastern hemisphere. What have you got for us today?
Well, certainly not diplomacy on behalf of the West, but today I'm going to talk about what has been happening in Turkey in the last few days. And we've had in Antalya Democracy Forum, which is held every year, and this was held on the 11th to the 13th of April of this year, entitled Reclaiming Diplomacy in a Fragmented World. Very interesting that among those that attended the forum were the current self-proclaimed president of Syria, Abu Muhammad al-Jolani, now known as Ahmed al-Sharaa, who came to the forum, met with Erdogan, as you can see in this report from Reuters. Erdogan is pushing hard for the lifting of Syria sanctions that, of course, were imposed, effectively claimed to be against the President Assad and the Syrian government. But, of course, we know they were a collective punishment for the Syrian people. But what I want to focus on is something that has created really an enormous stir at the conference, and that was the very short speech by Professor Jeffrey Sachs, a professor at Columbia University. He's an economist, he's a public policy analyst, and people might remember that he exposed the CIA Timber Sycamore project that was the project that started under the Obama administration to destabilize Syria on behalf of Israel and to topple the Syrian government and presidency. Now, bear in mind, I mentioned that Jolani was present at this conference along with his HTS or Al-Qaeda foreign minister, Assad Shaibani. So I think Jeffrey's words are particularly pertinent on that basis, but let's have a listen to the opening of his speech.
I am not discussing the agency of the Syrian people. I'm discussing the opposite. Do not be naive. Do not think that 600,000 people died because of Assad and the protesters. This was a war. Wars are expensive. They require billions of dollars. They require armaments. And I'm not talking about a conspiracy theory. I'm talking about a conspiracy. And you should know. Everybody go look up Operation Timber Sycamore. Understand what happened in your region. And if you think that calling in the CIA is going to do the bidding of agency in this region, you are sadly mistaken. This region has been manipulated by Britain, France, and the United States for 100 years since the Versailles Treaty.
I mean, this is an incredibly strong statement, bearing in mind the audience with whom he was putting out this statement. So he goes on to bring in Israel into the equation. So let's hear this.
It will not have safety or peace until the United States is out of this region through manipulation and war. You all say, well, it's Israel doing this. It's the same thing I'm talking about. It's the same reason for Operation Timber Sycamore. It's not an independent fact. It's the reason why this happened.
He then goes on to mention that it's very foolhardy to see the United States as a friend of the region, and he brings up the subject of Iran. So let's just quickly play this.
If you think your big friend, the United States, is going to do your bidding and help you get your way, empires divide to rule. They are not doing the bidding of Turkey or Syria or Lebanon or anybody else in this region. And if this is, yes, you want to balance Persia or Iran, you call in the United States to do that, and you think this is going to work out well?
I mean, this is also a criticism, of course, of Erdogan and his neo-Ottoman Empire aspirations that, of course, led to his backing of the coup back in December 2024. So a very powerful speech. I mean, Jeffrey Sachs is also, I have to say, involved in sustainable development goals at the UN. He heads up the Solution Network. But in this case, he did an extraordinary job. And where I say the shockwaves have been caused, I'm receiving messages from people that I know inside Turkey saying, we have to talk about this. We've got to start talking about what happened in Syria. So he definitely sort of opened the floodgates on people wanting to know exactly what went on in Syria. And of course, that can't ignore the role that Turkey played, but the fact that he mentioned the Zionist role alongside the US and basically said there's absolutely no difference, and it's a very foolish mission to call in the US to help you resolve the problems in the region. Powerful statement, and something that I think is going to have long-lasting consequences.
Vanessa, thank you very much for that. And I'll just reinforce the point about dialogue, because if people are calling for dialogue over Syria, when of course dialogue means that the truth comes to the surface or has the opportunity to come to the surface, this is exactly the same call underpinning the Cambridge conference on Ukraine. We need to talk about the issues. They need to be debated publicly. We need to get the legacy press and media talking about these issues, because this is what brings the facts and the information to the surface. So I am encouraged by that. And the other thing I'll add is, no, not everybody is getting the full picture. So there are some people speaking out in one aspect, but they are not seeing what's happening in the shadows, as it were. But we need to encourage people who start moving in the right direction. Now, as always, a very big thank you to the people who support UK Column. If you are not a member or donating to us, have a look on the UK Column website. You can, of course, make a donation to us at any time, including monthly, but also you can take out a monthly or an annual or a lifetime membership. You can also support us by making a purchase through the UK Column shop. And we always like to point out that we have Clive de Cole's healthcare products available. We make a small percentage on those. But overall, it's sharing information, which is something we like to see. We put out the information for the news for free, and we hope that you'll share that far and wide to give the UK Column some recognition. Now, as usual, we've got another interesting interview that's gone up on the UK Column, Facing the Tyrants, with Dr. Sam Beeley, and encourage you to have a look at that if you haven't already seen it, and of course share it. Tomorrow, Thursday the 17th of April at 1 p.m, I have an interview that I did with John West, the former Reform UK South Derbyshire chairman, on the reasons why he resigned from the party. Fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed it. I hope to be doing more with him. We've also like to say that for Friday and Monday of this coming weekend, we're going to put out more presentations from the Sense and Sensibility conference at Cambridge, which I introduced the news with today. We've also got the Thetford Truth and Freedom Beer Festival, Friday the 18th, Saturday the 19th of July. We're very happy to keep advertising. This is getting people together not only to speak and enjoy each other's company, but also to inform and educate. So delighted to see this starting to go on around the country. We've also got the big Stand in the Light festival in Cumbria for May the 23rd to the 26th. So music and people speaking on topics, and UK Column team will be there for that event. Now this one, Sandi, I think comes into your section, the dissident meetup of the Southwest region. What can you tell us?
Well, yes. I mean, obviously, people are beginning to see that their voice is being taken away, and that through their local councils, things are being eroded. The power is being eroded through things like devolution and other stuff that we'll talk about later. And really, it's about how, should we start resisting? Should we have a resistance against the council tax? I'm going to be speaking about devolution, particularly at this event, and we've got Chris Coverdale speaking the following day on the his whole sovereignty thing. So it'll be a great weekend, and do come along if you can, and meet us and talk to us, and there'll be some great presentations.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much for that. And I'll just add this one. This was an email sent to me today by Anthony Webber, independent political commentator, and he's pointing out that the local candidates for Runcorn and Helsby have been asked questions about peace in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. And I think this is a really excellent idea for sounding out candidates and putting them under a bit of pressure as to what they actually do think. Obviously, if you freeze the screen, if you're looking at the video on once it's up on the UK Column website, you can have a look at the actual questions that have been put to these candidates. But I regard this absolutely as activism. And on that subject, Sandi, let's come back to you, because you have been censored effectively by the local government in Glastonbury. Yes,
we were going to host an event with Clive de Carle and Richard Vobes on the 2nd of May. And we were told when the organiser went to pay for the event, it was already booked, and she was told that we weren't going to be allowed to speak. And we found out that earlier on in the year, they'd decided to censor certain talks in the town hall. It was the Property and Assets Committee that were put together, and it was because Sacha Stone had done a speech there, some kind of event there, that only a few, I mean, I think it was one person had a couple of people who were within the council and one that isn't, had complained about it. So they use this as an excuse to actually ban what they call conspiracy theorists. They haven't said as much, but the letter that we got from the town council seemed to point in that direction. But what they had a real problem with Clive de Carle's wonderful alternative medicines, supplements, and his magic chair that they seem to have a problem with, and they almost made it sound as though he was pushing quackery. But what's really, and for me, they said I would cause some kind of community tension by what I was talking about, because I was going to talk about UK corporate land grab, and also the bid for the World Heritage Site status by Glastonbury Town Council of Glastonbury. So they didn't like any of that. But what's interesting is, to do with Clive, is that they mentioned that there was a conflict of interest with what he was doing, which is alternative medicine, and what is coming up in one of the buildings next door to the town hall, which has been paid for by this big grant that we've had from government. It's 23.3 million, I think, from the town deal. And so this is going into a NHS trust wellness centre that's going into the building next door to the town hall, which is, I mean, it's a bit like a corporate takeover. So, there's a big thing to stop the World Heritage thing happening, because that again is there's a lot of worry about that. It needs to be talked about. There is a consultation going on at the moment that they've already paid 30,000 for. To gain status, it will cost 500,000. So we're looking at all this very carefully, and they don't like it at all. So we're not allowed to speak, basically. It's pretty bad. The whole thing, I think, is my letter to them really was about Glastonbury Town Hall is owned and operated by public authority. It's not a private venue because it's publicly funded. It's maintained through public funds, and it exists to serve the whole community, not just those whose views align with council officers. As residents and taxpayers, we've got the right to have free speech, and they should not be functioning as a political gatekeeping organisation. I mean, that's what effectively they seem to be doing. And I see this as an abuse of power. It's also against the Human Rights Act of 1998, which guarantees the right to freedom of expression under Article 10, provided you're not inciting hatred or violence, which we're not. We've held many, many events in the town hall that have been very happy, and the people have loved it. We've filled the town hall, but suddenly we are not allowed to speak. And it's a reflection of what's happening in our country now, where our voices are being sort of silenced because we're not allowed to speak our truth. We're deemed conspiracy theorists, and they're just literally sanctioning us and censoring us, which is appalling. It's an absolutely appalling situation. So we've both written letters, to Clive de Carl and I, to the town clerk. He's already responded to Clive and said, we stand by what we did, and we're not going to leave this alone. There will be a campaign to keep free speech alive in the town, because it's important. It's really important. And we're just going to carry on chipping away at them. Yeah.
Absolutely, keep chipping away at them. But what's so intriguing about what's happened here is this absolutely fits in with what you've been talking about, Ben, where you've been demonstrating that the intention is for the state to control media to the lowest possible level. And here we are with Sandi and Clive de Carl effectively being banned under this system.
Indeed, they are, yes. And I was under the impression that Glastonbury was a hotbed of radical thinking and freedom, but maybe it isn't. Just a quick question for you, Sandi. You may have mentioned this. Apologies if I missed it. But the World Heritage status, does that come from UNESCO? So that's essentially a UN compliance issue, right?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I mean, there's various World Heritage sites across Britain, particularly in Bath. I mean, a lot of the residents are really not happy with what's happened there, because as soon as you get World Heritage status, the whole infrastructure is there for World Heritage status. So you get more tourism and stuff like that. And it becomes more about tourism and less about the people that live there. So the cost of living goes up. There's nowhere to live because it's all Airbnbs, the usual story. Yeah. And also corporatization, all the corporates come in. That's it.
Just another gravy train, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's so cynical. And obviously another dynamic to Glastonbury, people certainly in the UK will be aware of the Glastonbury Music Festival, and that itself, again, which is supposedly certainly presents itself as a hotbed of radical thinking and, edginess and creativity, is absolutely slap bang in the middle of the climate agenda. And I actually flagged up this report a couple of weeks ago, which is the Global Mutarao, the global collective effort that is being run by Mission 25, which is basically the very, very top level global campaign backed by absolutely everybody driving towards COP30 in Brazil at the end of this year. And on their relatively short list of events that they've got mapped out through 25. Yeah, so what are there? There's probably 12 events there. One of them is Glastonbury. So in their summer run, May and June, Glastonbury, the music festival, they've pegged that as a key moment in this global effort driving towards energy transformation, system transformation. So the Glastonbury is right at the thick of this. It's a really interesting exemplar in a number of different ways of what's going on in the country and further afield. And I'm sticking in the West Country and with the issue of local corruption. And I really enjoyed this quote, which I did share last year from Marvin Rees, now known as Lord Rees of Easton. He's been elevated into the Lords at the start of this year. And he said, never underestimate the power of very small politics to get in the way of very big delivery. And obviously, he's on the side of very big delivery. And you, Sandi, and us, and I'd imagine most other people watching this, we're on the side of very small politics. And what is that phrase? If you don't think that you can make a big difference being small, I'm going to absolutely butcher this, but try sleeping in a room with a mosquito. You know, I think it was Mandela or Desmond Tutu or someone like that who said that, but he's absolutely right. It shows he probably didn't mean to do this, but it does demonstrate that actually small actions at a local level can really get in the way of big delivery, right? That's what Lord Rees is all about. And actually, he's a great example of, quite frankly, just the enormous hypocrisy and corruption in the system, in the climate agenda. And I want to just highlight a couple of things relating to Lord Rees. There was this instance a couple of years ago. Bristol City Council bans local democracy reporters from press briefings. Right, so we can see at the bottom there, the decision by Bristol Council follows a question asked by a local democracy reporter, actually, one of the BBC schemes. So unfortunately for the BBC, one of their people was doing his job. Alex Seabrook was asking Mayor Marvin Rees about his decision to fly to Canada in April for a 14-minute TED Talk on climate change. Yes, Marvin Rees, if climate change is a big issue, why are you flying to Canada for a 14-minute talk? Isn't that a bit hypocritical? Well, I tell you what, we'll just ban you from the briefings. That's what he did. Yeah. I mean, that's just remarkable, isn't it? You know, and as it turns out, he's not just what would you say, allergic to criticism. He's also, apparently, it would appear, rather partial to getting bunged lots of money by people he's cut deals for while in office. So a great bit of reporting actually from the Bristol Cable, which came out yesterday, I think, or maybe the day before, basically says that Marvin Rees receives payment from an energy giant that he awarded a massive contract to, right? So we've got this US firm, Amoresco, is now a paying client of Lord Rees of Easton, who struck the £1 billion City Leap decarbonisation deal with the firm when he was Bristol's mayor.
So it's just a coincidence.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't think you should be too worried about this at all.
Well, maybe they just thought he was a lovely guy in the meetings, and you know.
Well, man on the Clapham Omnibus might say it's corruption, but I think it was just a coincidence.
Yes, he coincidentally ended up with getting bunged a load of money by Amoresco, and this is fascinating. Sandi's going to come onto this in a minute, right? Because this was one of the largest private deals in Bristol Council history. It was £1 billion to be spent over 20 years. It's going to run until 2042. It's about decarbonising the city's energy network. It involved council staff being transferred to work in the private sector. So essentially selling off component parts of the council to Amoresco and also to an organisation called Vattenfall, which is a Swedish power company, which is a partner of the World Economic Forum. Right, so we talk about this corporatisation of the state and the Great Reset and all of this kind of stuff. They are literally going around, and now publicly available information about specific examples of where corporations who are WEF partners are going around and are acquiring bits of the council signed off by people like Marvin Rees. Right, and actually Amoresco, which was the key participant in this bill, is owned by Vanguard, which holds a 9.3% stake, and BlackRock, which owns a 6.8% stake. So both of the private sector entities involved in this are World Economic Forum partners, either directly or through their ownership structure, right? And Marvin Rees, he hasn't gone away. He's not the mayor anymore, but he, as we said, has been bumped up to the House of Lords. He's a member, if you go to the very bottom line, of the World Economic Forum Global Future Council on the Cities of Tomorrow. And then he's all across C40, Core Cities, 3CI. You know, this guy is extraordinarily influential and powerful, sits right at the nexus of this transformation of the country through new energy systems, new governance systems, mass immigration, like all of the component parts of this radical change agenda. And what does he get for it? Well, he's bumped up and he's now looking splendid in his finery in the House of Lords. You know, absolutely disgusting.
And once we can see it, or rather, once we can see it, Ben, we can do something about it. The key thing is to expose these people and what they're doing, and to expose the bodies that they're involved in, the non-governmental bodies and the charities and the sustainable development goal groups that are driving this agenda. Let's bring you back in, Sandi, because something else you've been looking at and you regarded as strange, and it wants to be looked at by the audience, is the idea of Freeport sites in UK.
Yes, I've been looking at this just recently. These are called special economic zones. Now they're free ports and investment zones, and I've got a few maps to show you exactly what's going on. Now this was an idea apparently of Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak post Brexit. To try and encourage more sort of a growth plan. And it was unveiled in the mini budget of 2022. These zones aim to stimulate economic growth post-Brexit. That was the idea, by offering tax incentives and relaxed planning regulations to attract investment and boost job creation. But really, underneath it, Rishi Sunak really wanted to, I think, reduce to ease all this taxation that was coming through from Brexit. In these special economic zones, they have taxes that are reduced or eliminated, planning regulations relaxed, environmental and labour laws may be weakened, and often businesses, multinationals, are given special privileges. Now, they have a very different legal framework, these. So it's a transfer of UK law into private legal frameworks of corporations. And this is what we're seeing. I've got a slide of that. So it really is the Freeports. If we can go to the Freeport map, the Freeport areas that we've got at the moment are, I think it's Teesside, Humber, Thames, Felixstowe, Harwich, East Midlands, Liverpool City region, Plymouth and Solent. And then you've got the zones that are planned across West Midlands, Greater Manchester, Liverpool, South and West Yorkshire, the North East and West Yorkshire. Now, these tend to cluster in post-industrial areas under the banner of sort of regeneration. We're seeing a lot of this. But the true beneficiaries are often global capital and multinational corporations. So these zones aren't, isolated policies. They're components of a broader global restructuring agenda linked to net zero and climate finance. SESs and Freeports will become hubs for net zero infrastructure. The projects are often bankrolled by public money, but controlled by private interests, creating greenwashing and public-private control. So it's all about public-private partnerships controlling the free ports. So you don't know what's going in and out of these ports. It could be anything. It could be drug trafficking. It could be people trafficking. It could be anything, because they're not regulated. They make up their own rules and they profit from the free trade that's going through them. That's the problem. SES is aligned with the SDG goals like sustainable industry and resilient infrastructure, but in practice, they concentrate control into fewer hands. That's the problem. They enable technocratic governance, they support datafication and surveillance under smart city models. This is they're stepping stones towards a post-democratic world, really. They embed unelected corporate power. They serve net zero and technocratic control goals. So, in essence, these are a real stepping stone to taking the power away from the people and UK government and turning it into technocratic governance. Now, this is the progression of the SEZs will ultimately be the Charter Cities plan, which is almost like the SEZs on steroids. These are semi-autonomous zones with a sovereign state. So they're almost like a state within a state. They operate a bit like Canary Wharf. Canary Wharf, they've got their own policing system and they've got their own laws. So it really is there to attract foreign investors by offering better rules, i.e. more favourable to capital. And who runs it? Private entities and foreign governments. Do we really want this? No. It will cause less transparency and less control for the people of this country. Yeah.
Sandi, thank you very much. And my mind, once again, Ben, goes to your key point, which you've been talking about now for months and months, which is the power of the public-private partnerships in taking not only commercial control away from people at local level, but effectively political control.
And importantly, and people really, and I think you can really see it in what we've covered today, is that this has already been done. Right, so the system has already been specified, funded, planned out. They put the agreements in place. Bristol signed up for a 20-year deal, just one example, and they're building it. We've never been asked about it. No one's ever voted for it. We're paying for it, through our taxation and through these clandestine public-private deals that they're putting in place. And there's been absolutely no discussion about it whatsoever. It's just being done through coercion.
Absolutely. Vanessa, ideal time to bring you back on screen because you've been doing some really unique investigation into what's been going on in the background with Israel. And apparently we can relax because Israel is now going to look after not only our health in the NHS, but it's also going to look after our mental health. What have you been discovering?
Yep. Not only is it going to prescribe for us based on our DNA and our capacity for mental health problems, of course, it's going to store that DNA on Zionist partisan cloud storage belonging to Oracle. Now, I'm going to start banging the 2030 roadmap for UK-Israel bilateral relations drum again. I know I keep bringing this up, but it's incredibly important for people to understand fully what this really means. So let's just have a look at part of that document relating to pandemic preparedness. So COVID-19, continuing cooperation and information sharing to effectively tackle COVID-19, sharing best practices, definitely in inverted commas, through partnering the best of UK and Israeli expertise. It then goes on to say that basically the Pan-Northern Health Tech Gateway, building on the UK-Israel Health Tech Gateway that was launched in May 2022 and that we covered on UK Column, we pledged to work together to tackle major healthcare challenges, establishing a long-term partnership. So in other words, people can freeze frame and read the whole thing, or they can go to whatever website they use or website browser they use and check out the 2030 roadmap. I really recommend it because it's pretty horrifying how Israel is going to infiltrate every sector of British society. So today what I'm looking at is mental health, as you mentioned, Brian. And this is an AI technology, app, Predictix, October 2022, so just after that Israel tech startup collaboration began. New UK-Israel collaboration to bring innovative mental health treatment solutions to the NHS in the UK. And at the bottom in the small print, it basically says, grounded research team at Rotherham, Doncaster, Southampton, NHS Foundation Trust, groundbreaking collaboration with Israeli digital health company Talyaz. Now, Talyaz is effectively the developer of the Predictix app or system. So let's have a look at their PR video to demonstrate exactly what this does.
Meet Talyaz, tailoring the right treatment for each individual. A groundbreaking genetic, clinical, and demographic-based tool designed using a unique and sophisticated platform of predictive machine learning algorithms. A unique tool that has been validated against the world's largest data sets. Here's how it works. A DNA sample is taken from the patient in a simple and painless process. A number of background questions are uploaded to the cloud, and the Talyaz tool goes to work. The data goes through cross-analysis using prediction algorithms based on countless comparisons between genetic and clinical data of patients around the world. Within a short amount of time, a recommendation is received on the most suitable treatment for the individual. This is how healthcare should be. Talyaz, tailoring the right treatment for each individual.
Vanessa, you were smiling. We were smiling as well, but really we shouldn't be smiling because this is such dangerous policy, never mind the technology.
Well, I mean, it's fast track to medication. It doesn't factor in finding other solutions to people's mental health issues. It's fast tracking to medication based on your DNA results. And worth noting, your demographic factors also are being factored into the final medication prescription, and the fact that DNA is then being stored on the cloud that is also being operated by effectively an Israeli company that is managing the UK Ministry of Defence, Ministry of Health, and so on. So let's have a look again at how it works, just for people to understand it. So first of all, you'll have a digital questionnaire. Note that you're not expected to go in and actually talk to somebody, which in many cases would actually resolve any minor mental issues that you might have. You then have the genetic test, which is an odd naming of it or labeling of it, which again will collect your DNA through a cheek swab. And this decides if you are predisposed to mental health issues. So in other words, you might be given medication even if you are not currently suffering with mental health issues. In my opinion, that's how I'm interpreting this. Then the personalized report, which will give the results digital or in a personal consultation. So finally, we get to hear about a personal consultation. And then effectively precision medication prescribing, the tailored treatment and dosage for your patient, but do they actually need that medication? Then it goes on to explain, step into the future of mental health, prescribing with Predictix in your clinic, improve patient care with better clinical outcomes. Well, I'm not sure that's the case because, again, there's no personal interaction at all. Optimize time and clinical efficiency. So this is all about optimizing time and efficiency. It's the disintegration of the mental health system, just as we've seen the national health system being also broken down. Increase in revenue with superior outcomes. What on earth, what bearing does this have on successful treatment of mental health in the UK? And it claims to be HIPAA and GDPR compliant. And then let's have a look at the drugs that are among those that will be put forward by Predictix. So there you have, I'm not going to read them all out. People, again, can freeze frame them and have a look at them and have a look at the debilitating effects of the majority of these drugs that are going to be wheeled out with very little checks and balances on the prescription of those drugs. And then guess what? I want to come on to who are actually the founders and CEOs of Talyaz. that are putting forward the Predictix AI system, remembering, of course, that Israel is responsible for AI systems that have been basically used to generate the genocide of Palestinians. So the first, the CEO, Dr. Tekel, Talia's co-founder, served as an infantry officer in the Israeli military. He headed mission strategy and planning, making high-pressure decisions to save lives in combat conditions. He's now in charge, or is certainly part of the collaboration in the UK towards the mental health system. And then secondly, his brother, Oren Talia, CFO and co-founder, this is taken from their website, previously led a private security guard team for the Eisenberg family. I had to actually look up who the Eisenberg family is. They're a very influential Zionist family that has connections to Netanyahu and members of the Knesset, commanded special infantry unit in the IOF experience in combat. So then let's go on to the Northern Health Science Alliance, improving mental in Yorkshire and Humber. A Northern partnership was launched in 2023. If we have a look at the members of the NHSA, we can see the universities and NHS organisations that are involved. Again, you can freeze frame it and have a look at it, but you've got Sheffield University, York, Liverpool, Manchester, Durham, Teesside, and I can't read the bottom one, Lancashire, I think, or Lincolnshire.
Lancashire.
But you can, thank you. And a number of the NHS sectors were also heavily involved in it. Now, the partnership is with the Northern Innovation Accelerator, Mental Health Phase 1, Northern Innovation Accelerator for Mental Health, partnering with the NHSA to improve, apparently, your mental health. So let's have a look at what they say. Improving mental health in Yorkshire and Humber. Note that the focus is very much in northern UK. They're working in collaboration with innovators to develop and evaluate mental health solutions within the NHS, reaching a potential of 17 million patients. Brian, I don't know about your opinion, but I find this terrifying. 17 million patients. What they're effectively saying, there are 17 million potential patients for mental health care and medication based on their DNA and demographics. Dr. Mandy Dixon, who's head of corporate engagement in the NHSA, not NASA, sorry, that's a typo by me. She says, post-pandemic, so note the connection with COVID-19 that was also picked up in the roadmap for Israel and the UK. The need to innovate in mental health services is greater than ever, particularly with growing evidence of the economic impact of poor mental health on the economic recovery. Not on the patient, not on the human beings that suffered mental health issues as a result of the measures taken during the pandemic, such as lockdown and so on, and leading to depression and unemployment, and multiple other consequences of the lockdown measures, but to foment basically economic recovery. So the focus on economic benefits to the state and to the NHS here are quite extraordinary, over and above the benefits to the patient themselves. And then basically let's have a look at who the exemplars or the partners are in this. So first of all, Talia's that we've been speaking about, but also a company called MindLife, which talks about testing several digital innovations to improve mental health, therapy and treatment outcomes, including remote group therapy. So again, we have this idea of remote group therapy with a self-help app. So suddenly mental health issues are going to be dealt with remotely. I mean, I'm kind of laughing at this because it is so insane to me. What helps people with mental health issues is communication and being able to speak to another human being and receiving some kind of empathy back. They're not going to receive empathy through a self-help app. But then let's have a look at Tuvi Orbach, who's the CEO of MindLife. And guess what? He grew up and he was educated in Israel. Technolon, the Israeli Institute of Technology, and is now involved alongside Palias in mental health treatment through apps in the UK. I mean, I find this horrifying based on the fact that Israel is currently conducting a genocide since October the 7th, 2023 in Palestine. It is militarily expanding into the region, causing deprivation, decimation of the countries where it is advancing rapidly, including Syria and Lebanon. And here it is heavily involved in the treatment of people in the UK with mental health issues and fast tracking them to medication, which for me should be the final solution. It's certainly not something that people should be forced into because their DNA says so. And part of their mission statement is to reduce the number of patients dropping out of treatment. That's on their website. So they're actually looking to prevent people recovering from mental health issues and to prevent them getting off the medication that they've been put on through these AI systems that are now being introduced, that have been developed in Israel.
Vanessa, thank you very much for a really outstanding segment there. And my goodness, the idea that we should be feeling confidence because we have members of Israeli Defense Forces who are now coming in not only to run the NHS, but also look after our mental health. This is, I could say, extraordinary, but if we go back to 2010 through to 2015, the UK column was warning what the Conservative government was doing. We had Francis Maud on screen earlier in today's news. And of course, as well as introducing applied behavioural psychology to help terrify the British population into doing the bidding of the in-post political system, he was also agreeing for our intelligence services to be fully entwined and linked up with not only Israeli intelligence units such as Unit 8200, but also there was going to be a, quote, partnership between British and Israeli universities. None of it ever discussed in Parliament. So most MPs totally unaware of what's going on. And now this pernicious public-private partnership with Israel is moving through to cover mental health. If there's anybody in our audience today, whether you're in UK or worldwide, that does not understand how dangerous this is and how significant it is, then I really don't know what to say. But Ben, we've got people at work totally unaccountable, being given more and more power, not only in an economic sense, but over our personalities and our bodies. It's quite incredible.
Isn't it just? Yeah, I mean, that's the weaponization of the health system against the population who's paying for it. Yeah.
Okay. Well, Vanessa and Sandi, thank you very much for joining us. We're out of time, but before I leave the news today, I just want to hold up a couple of publications. This one I was given at the Cambridge conference. It's called The Whole Truth About Ukraine's Crimes in Donbass. I couldn't put any of the opening images on screen because these are showing people who've been not only killed, but maimed as a result of shelling. So a lot of incredible information came to the surface, and I'm going to try and think of a way that UK Column can help promulgate this very factual analysis of some really horrible events in Ukraine. But probably this is also a place to end the news. Sorry if I just bring that. This was a booklet given to me at the Cambridge event. It's called The American Gulag Chronicles. And this is a really amazing book. Letters from prison. These are letters written by prisoners who were put in prison as a result of the so-called Capitol Hill riots. And it's a story of just total abuse of these individuals within the American prison system. So I'm going to end today's news really where I started with that Cambridge event. People need to understand that the idea of freedom and democracy in the West is an illusion. We are under massive attack. Not only our families, but as individuals, our very bodies and minds are under attack. And this is happening while we're also distracted with these terrible overseas events in Ukraine or in Yemen or in Palestine, wherever it's taking place. So we need to be discerning. And as somebody said in our chat box, evil doesn't manifest through a group of people, it manifests through individuals. So we need to be judging people on an individual basis if we're going to get the top off what's really happening to us in 2025. We'll end there. Thank you very much for joining UK Column News. We are having a break this weekend, so no UK column on Friday or Monday, but Friday and Monday we will put out talks from that Cambridge Peace Conference. We'll end there. Thank you very much for joining us. Ben, thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.